Attendees, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to our Constitution Day events, which we're going to be celebrating all week long here at Maricopa Community Colleges. These events are brought to you by Maricopa's Center for Excellence in Inclusive Democracy, as well as the great civic engagement staff all across our district. I want to give a special shout out and thank you to the folks in MCLI for supporting all of the technical support that they provide, which really makes these events possible. So couldn't do it without them. Our goal is to provide you with factual information so that you can make your own educated decisions about voting, as well as being an informed, engaged individual in our community. All of our events this week are nonpartisan. Again, we just want to equip you with factual information so that you can make well-informed decisions. And in fact, that's one of the goals here at Maricopa Community College. In addition to offering great education and transfer, job opportunities, getting you set up for that next phase in life, our responsibility is also to make sure that you are active, engaged community members and with the skill set to engage in your broader community once you leave us here at Maricopa. Our week started off Monday, a discussion about the 10 ballot initiatives that voters are going to be asked to consider come November. So if you're going to go to the polls and vote in November, you definitely want to set up a plan and have all of your answers in place and do your research. Yesterday, we had a great panel talking about how civic engagement really is a very broad umbrella, and it's more than just voting. I think some people hear civic engagement and think immediately in voting. That's super important. We encourage everyone who can to do so, but there's so much more. Anytime you volunteer, anytime you're active with student government or a club or out in your community, that is all civic engagement and just as equally as important. Today, Wednesday, September 14th, we are joined by Alexis Susdorf, Maricopa Community College's Government Relations Director. Alexis does a great job of representing us, and she's going to talk about Maricopa's legislative agenda. And just as individuals interact with elected officials, Maricopa as a system of community colleges also interacts with our legislature and elected officials from local, state to federal level. And thankfully, Alexis leads that charge for us and has done a phenomenal job. So Alexis, thanks for joining us today for our Constitution Week activities.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And you can't forget Heidi here in the background, my fierce Doberman, who's going to help with this presentation.
Fabulous. I always love those extra assistants on hand. So before we started with the presentation, Alexis, can you give us a little bit about your background? We heard on Monday from Paul Benst, who's a local pollster, how you originally started off wanting to be a math teacher. So did you always want to be in the world of government relations, or how did you land here? Just in case students are out there listening and trying to figure out their career path.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm looking in the chat, some names are really familiar. So it's so nice to see some of you again and so nice to meet some of you. I mean, really, this all stemmed from an internship that I participated in, which is what really garnered my interest within more of the policy space. When I was going through school, I was interested in going to law school. So somewhat connected, but after I finished school and then I did my escapades in Europe, I came back and had no money. And I thought, you know what, I need to get a job. So I went, after an internship I had participated in college at our legislature, they had a job ready for me, so I went there. And kind of my original plan was to work a little bit, you know, get a little bit of money and then go to law school. But after I started, I realized, wow, like I'm really enjoying this, and this is more of the policy space versus the attorney space. So it really, it set my sail into this job today. And just a little bit about sort of my background and trajectory. I've always been someone in the education space. I started out in K-12 education, working at our state's education department, doing policy work. I moved over to First Things First, which is our state's early childhood department, which really handles early childhood education as well as health topics. And then I moved over to Maricopa Community Colleges about 2 years ago, to serve within this government relations director role. So I've really had like that P20 education spectrum, and it's so interesting to see the variety of agencies and you know, really the policy topics. And I always share with folks, what's probably the most interesting for me in my job now is I've been under the governance of a variety of different sources. And when I say that, when I worked at our state Department of Education, I worked for a single elected official, a single state superintendent. When I was over at First Things First, I worked for an appointed board, so at a board that was appointed by the governor. And then now at Maricopa Community Colleges, I work for an elected board, so at a board that is elected by Maricopa County residents. So it's been really interesting. You know, each entity operates a little bit differently given the governance and given, you know, how their leadership is made up. And, you know, all of them have their pros and cons. I've seen the value in each one. So it's just from a governance perspective, that's been probably the most interesting part of my job, is to have that privilege of working under kind of a different umbrella of governance and seeing, you know, how they operate. So that's kind of a little bit about me. Dan, I probably went way too in depth, but
This is
anything
great.
else, or do you want me to kind of jump in?
Yes, and this is a good reminder for our students, the idea of internships and trying jobs out. Sometimes we end up focusing on a career path, and until you give yourself some exploration and really try the job, sometimes you'll unexpectedly find your passion. And we've heard that repeatedly from our panelists so far this week. So thanks for sharing that, Alexis. Yeah, why don't you share screen? And Alexis is going to walk you through what we call the legislative agenda, which is what Maricopa is hoping to accomplish when we work with elected officials throughout the year. So we'll let her share her screen. And she does a fabulous job presenting. Again, if you have questions as we go along, please pop them in the chat. I'll be monitoring those and we will get to as many as possible. So Alexis, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Yeah. So I will just kind of jump in. Obviously, you've got to know me a little bit. I'm our government relations director here at Maricopa. So really, I manage government relations for the district, as well as I support the 10 colleges within their work. And I'll get into what government relations really means. So when Deanna approached me about this, I was really trying to summarize, you know, what is government relations and kind of how do we work. That's within the pictures on the side, that's me on the top. And then the two bottom are our contract lobbyists that really support my work. And I'll sort of talk a little bit about how we interact. Sometimes the term lobbyist isn't always the most well received. You know, within circles, I find a tremendous value in really good contract lobbyists. And that's what we have. Kelsey, who's on the right-hand side, and Jesse on the left-hand side are with Compass Strategies, and they are the best of the best at the Capitol. They bring a tremendous amount of relationships. They know the legislative process extremely well. And, you know, really they're passionate about their clients. We're one of their clients, and they're super passionate about the work that we do. And so I'm kind of a one-man shop from an internal kind of Maricopa standpoint, but we do thankfully have some support within our contract lobbyists that really help with our legislative work. So again, when Deanna was asking me this to present, I was, you know, going down a list of everything that I do, and my work is a lot of other duties is assigned. I just get things thrown about from different areas, which I love. It just makes every day interesting and every day so different. But the two main things that are really define my roles are legislator or elected official engagement. I don't just want to say state legislator. This is anything from local engagement with city council, local engagement with our county supervisors, to state engagement with our 90 members of the legislature, and then federal engagement, engaging with our congressional delegation, our 11 members, 9 at the Congress, and then our 2 senators. And I'll kind of get into that. Engagement looks so different within each member and each space and each purpose. So, you know, really getting to know these folks and getting to know the right way of engagement is really the name of the game in my world. And then the other item, which we'll get into in a minute about what's on our agenda, but my other kind of like one job that I have to accomplish each year is developing our legislative agenda that's approved by our governing board. Really, it's our governing board's agenda. And I am, after they approve the agenda, I kind of go forth and do my best to make that happen. So this is actually like hot off the press because last night our governing board had their first work session about our legislative agenda. So this is information that is new to the public just of last night. So you all are getting a real taste of something that is not super widespread. and kind of sharing information about our legislative agenda and priorities at the Capitol. So, and other duties as assigned, I mean, again, this really takes up a lot of my job, but anything that sort of quantifies elected official or government relations engagement. So, anything from cabinet level members to helping prepare our college leadership chancellor or governing board if there's some sort of elected official engagement with talking points or prep points, just, really making sure everyone's on the same page. It's my job to sort of be the subject matter expert on everything policy. So keeping up to speed on what's going on at the state, at the local, the federal level. So, when something comes about and someone asks me the question, hey, what's going on with this bill? It's important that I know, or it's important that, next time they ask me, I know, to just stay apprised of everything that's going on. So when I talk about engagement with elected officials, like I said, there is just such a variety of activities that's in this space, and then such a variety of people that participate in engagement. It's not just me. I'm really saying my job is the storytelling. It's really connecting legislators and elected officials with really the faculty, the students, and the folks that are doing this incredible work that we're so proud of at the Maricopa Community Colleges. So engagement activities, in-office visits, that's really a popular item that happens during the state legislative session when they're down at the Capitol, sessions going on. I am in legislator offices all the time talking about bills, talking about amendments that I need to bills, really using this opportunity to get to know them more, get to know their interests. That is a really popular engagement opportunity, but it's usually more so like a singular topic that I need to address with them on something that's problematic or an idea that we have that we're interested in moving forward. One popular item that's happening right now because our state legislature is not in session is tours of our colleges. The colleges are the ones really doing the incredible work. There's so many great programs and there's so many powerful student stories. So bringing our elected officials out to the colleges to see the good work happening firsthand, that's really what it happens kind of in this fall time as we gear up for the start of the next state legislative session. And then just kind of like getting to know people, right? That the name of the game is relationships. It's, having that deep relationship with somebody. So just, staying connected, going to coffee, going to lunches, just really developing relationships. I always say my job is not a job that can really be automated, right? It is having that relationship with folks so that when you do have an ask of something, and ask being, hey, we need money for this program, or hey, we need an amendment on this bill because it's a problem, it makes it much easier to ask them for something when you have a relationship versus, I've never been in your office before, I've never met you, but I need an amendment. So really, I'd say the coffee and lunches part, that's where I go back to our contract lobbyists. There's 90 members at our state capitol. I have no capacity to manage that many relationships, but they do. Kelsey Ledgy, who is on the right-hand side, she has been at the Capitol. She doesn't look like it, but over 30 years. And she is just so deeply ingrained and has really personal connections with a lot of these members. Some of these members have, been reelected several cycles. So she is really well known within this space. And then, really, they support me in bringing that relationship. If I need a meeting with a member, I'll, call Kelsey or Jesse and say, hey, Kelsey, Jesse, I need a meeting with blank because we need to talk to them about amendment on this bill, or I need a meeting on this to talk about, this budget priority of our governing board. So they are really, I say, the relationship bringing. Of course, it's important for me to have the relationship, but I'm sort of serving more of that, feeding them the information to get our legislative agenda accomplished. And then engagement isn't, again, just with me. It is with a large variety of students to really connect our elected officials to the work that we do. Our board members, our elected governing board members, are very involved in engagement with elected officials. Oftentimes they know these people very personally well because kind of the elected official community is a tight-knit community. Our college presidents and leadership of our districts, like our interim chancellor, Dr. Stephen Gonzalez, are deeply engaged in activities with legislators. Students, we have had a ton of students participate in legislator engagement, talking about how legislation or budget items will impact them. And then subject matter experts. Sometimes you just got to bring somebody in on a really technical topic to get into the weeds on that topic. And I'm not the weeds person. I'm the one that connecting them to the weeds person. So, based on the purpose of the engagement activity is, we kind of tailor and make the decision on who's the best one to bring in for these engagement activities. And anyone jump in, ask questions. Dan, I saw like something float in the chat. So just jump in because I can't see you all when I'm presenting.
No, thanks. You're doing a great job, Alexis. I'll be just entering some fun facts into the chat as you proceed. And again, students, staff that might be listening in, feel free to pop in your questions. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah, so engagement activities, we have had so much momentum in the last 2 years. It is, I say, a very good time to be a community college. Community colleges are seen as, workforce development providers. There is, it's such a tight knit. It is ingrained in communities, right? Whereas a university is much more expansive and serves in-state, out-of-state. I mean, community colleges are ingrained in these elected official communities, so they feel an affinity and feel that connection. And so engagement is anything from the top right. We had Senator Kelly out to Chandler Gilbert. He visited the aviation and drone program. Him being a NASA astronaut, this is like the coolest tour ever. At the bottom left corner, that is just a picture. We brought all of our college presidents out to the Capitol last year to do like a Capitol Day. They met with legislators. They watched a variety of committee and floor sessions, really to engage them more into the legislative process and get them more connected with elected officials. You'll see Congressman Stan wearing the Mesa Community College Thunderbirds t-shirt or jersey. This was really exciting. They do the annual congressional softball game, and he had reached out to us to see if he could wear the Mesa jersey as part of the softball game. So we were super excited about that. The top right, we do an annual Champions of Maricopa, where we honor 8 legislators, bipartisan, 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, that have just gone above and beyond to support Maricopa through the legislative session. So that is kind of another engagement opportunity. We always take that time to at some sort of program or campus, because while we want to continue that relationship building, we want to take every opportunity to show off the incredible assets happening and the incredible work and programs at the community colleges. So the middle kind of bottom, this is local engagement. We've done a lot of engagement with our local city councils, and this is an opportunity with Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego, who visited one of our manufacturing programs at Gateway Community College. And in the bottom right, this is really the cabinet level. This is, we had U.S. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh out at Gateway Community College's nursing program to kind of do a roundtable to learn more about the nursing workforce shortage and ways that they can federally engage. So again, engagement is variety that looks different. Anything from local mayors all the way up to U.S. cabinet members that are reporting to President Biden. So it's expansive. It's kind of anything, and really this is the fun part about my job, because it makes me really proud, and we have so much to show off, and the work of our colleges, the work of our faculty, and the incredible students. It just, showing this off makes my job that much easier. So when I go to the Capitol next year and say, hey, Senator X or Representative Y, I need this. And remember when you went out to Chandler Gilbert and you saw that incredible program and you talked to that amazing student, that's what this funding or this bill is going to impact. So I need your support on this. So it really helps craft a story. And again, just making that ask that we have so much easier in the back end when we do all of this kind of front end work to develop relationships and get them ingrained and get them excited about the work happening at community colleges. So I talked about a little bit, and this is really my purpose for being here, but our legislative, our state and federal policy agenda. This is sort of the process and timeline that we followed to developing our agenda. In June and July this summer, we convened an internal committee consisting of college leadership, consisting of faculty members and staff level folks to really participate in the dialogue of what are the needs of the community colleges and the students that we should consider pursuing next legislative session. So that committee kind of met and developed recommendations. The recommendations then went to our chancellor and his kind of leadership cabinet for their review and feedback and additional thoughts. And then also another step was going to our board's public affairs committee. This is a subset of our full board of 3 members that really support our government relations work. So went to this committee. Last night, again, we had our board work session to discuss this legislative agenda, received feedback, and the goal is to bring it forward at our late September, I think it's the 26th or 27th, it's a Tuesday night, for their hopeful adoption. And then after they adopt that agenda is really when the fun happens. That's when, you know, we start getting out with our elected officials to talk to them about it, get their interest, see what members might be interested, what legislation they might be interested in supporting, and then what we're kind of hearing and seeing that might come up that we might need to insert ourselves into, either fix or make go away. So come October is when you know, the real work begins. So again, these are all pending recommendations that were discussed last night, so they're kind of subject to change, but kind of some themes that are on our state legislative agenda. Again, we have a state and a federal agenda. A variety of funding and financial incentives to support our students as well as our colleges. Teacher preparation programs to support the development of pre-K through 12 teachers is a huge interest of our legislature, and we've seen year after year them investing in scholarship programs for teachers. So just hoping for the board's approval to continue to support these programs, knowing that this is a critical workforce. Early college dual enrollments, this is a huge priority at the Capitol right now. But this is really a program some of you may have participated in before for students. I know I did, but it's an opportunity for high school students to take college level courses. And there is just a tremendous amount of data supporting dual enrollment. It not only enhances a person's high school graduation, but also enhances their likelihood to enroll in college and complete college. So this is really a great pipeline to growing our post-secondary enrollment and completion. And there is a lot of interest at the Capitol to be able to grow dual enrollments, really financial incentives to grow the teacher pipeline. We know one of the barriers to dual enrollment is just not having enough people to teach these courses. So I know that there's interest to incentivize more high school teachers to take the leap and to get the credentials to be able to teach dual enrollment. But then there's also financial barriers to students. The tuition and fees associated with these can be a barrier to a student participating. So I know there's interest to sort of address that from both a policy and funding standpoint. It's something we hope to be at the forefront of next legislative session. 2 formulas that Maricopa is either not in or we recently got in. Formulas are kind of means to funding that the state general fund goes out to community colleges. One formula that we've been historically cut out of the STEM and operational aid formula for several years now, but last year we were super excited because we were permanently put back in the STEM formula, meaning, you know, we should get funds to support STEM and workforce development for our colleges in years to come. One formula we continue to remain cut out of is the operational aid formula, which is really just supporting day-to-day operations of our colleges. And we've continue to have dialogue, continue to educate members about the importance of putting Maricopa back into that formula to better support our colleges and better support our students and the services offered to students. So continuing to chip away at the operational aid while still ensuring that the recently restored STEM formula is maintained. And then there's a lot of interest in investments in fast track programs. For example, one that's gotten a lot of attention from our legislature and the media is the recent development of a Semiconductor Technician Quick Start program, which is a 2-week boot camp style program to get folks the skill sets to be able to go and work in semiconductor fabrication lab, which is a growing workforce in Arizona. That is an extremely innovative way to develop a much needed workforce, and there's a lot of interest to invest in those types of models. So, you know, we are looking for authority to be able to be responsive when all of this kind of legislative interest continues to grow over the next couple months. And then student success aid. There is a lot of acknowledgement that there's a tremendous amount of costs beyond tuition and fees for students. Tuition and fees is just one piece of the pie of a student being able to enroll in community college and complete community college. So there is interest to develop a variety of scholarship mechanisms to support students beyond just tuition and fees at community colleges. A couple of sort of policy spaces that we're interested in monitoring is last year, community colleges gained authority to offer 4-year baccalaureate degrees for our students. We're excited to hopefully launch our first 7 degrees in the fall of 2023, but just continue to keep an eye on that. We worked really hard to get that authority last year, and it was a bit of a challenge with our universities who saw it as somewhat of a competition. So we, you know, are always going to keep an eye on that to ensure there's no funny business happening, that they're going to somehow upend that authority. So that is a major priority, just to keep an eye on that. And then just to continue to streamline it. The legislation that was developed had a lot of prescribed language in it to ensure we're not being overly duplicative of that of university programs or flooding a job market, which is critically important. We have no interest in flooding a job market with a bunch of students who complete our programs who don't have jobs to go to. But at the same time, that really kind of detailed language makes implementing this really, really challenging. And so just continuing to keep an eye on opportunities to streamline the current statute that we're governed by for our 4-year baccalaureate degrees, to make it easier for us to develop programs, for us to develop programs quicker, and, you know, really, in essence, to support students' enrollment within our programs sooner. Local control of college governments. This is something that's we're always keeping an eye out. While some community colleges are protected in our Constitution, meaning in order to sort of change the Constitution, it has to go back to the voters for their approval, or some other kind of other processes that the legislature can take. There is a variety of statutes that govern community colleges that the legislature has the authority to change. We, as I mentioned, at Maricopa have an elected governing board that really makes decisions based on the best interest of our colleges and our students. So, you know, really just keeping an eye out for anything that could happen in governance where the legislature maybe oversteps in items that we consider being best served by our elected governing board. And then I put important because this is the most important thing on our agenda, and it is a super wonky policy topic. And some of you may have seen a little bit of dialogue in K-12. It's called expenditure limitation. It is a formula that is protected in the Constitution, meaning we have to go back to the voters to make changes within that formula. It sets the spending cap of community colleges, so how much we're allowed to spend. It was a formula developed over 42 years ago, and it is a formula that is just not serving community colleges any longer. 42 years ago, programs looked so different than they do today. 42 years ago, nursing was a stethoscope. Now we've got full nursing simulation centers. So while the expenditure limitation formula, which is protected in the Constitution, sets our spending cap for community colleges. There are subsets of that formula that are outside of the Constitution that we're able to make changes to. We are seeking, and this is our top priority, because we're seeking some legislative changes to the expenditure limitation formula to increase the spending cap of community colleges to really better serve our students, to develop and enhance programs that are of interest to our legislature, industry, and our workforce. It's been a broken formula now for several years. We've gotten kind of 1-year reprieves. The legislature acknowledges that the expenditure limitation needs to be fixed. And there has been 1-year iterations the last couple of years to give basically a reprieve. So it's basically saying we give you the authority to exceed your expenditure limitation with a very de minimis penalty. So they acknowledge that this formula needs to be revised. It's just there's a lot of players in the mix that have a variety of ideas on how we fix that. Some don't want to fix it. So that's really where lobbyists come into play. A variety of lobbyists have a variety of positions on behalf of their clients. So, while we're grateful to have sort of 1-year reprieves each year, that sort of Band-Aid approach to policy is not the best way to govern. And our goal is to get this, ask the legislature to utilize their authority to modernize that formula within the purview of the legislature. Some of you that may watch closely, K-12 has had a big media push about their expenditure limitation issue. While our formulas are entirely different, so we are not all governed by the same expenditure limitation, our reasons for needing expenditure limitation reprieve or modernization are the same. Both of our formulas were developed in the same time frame. Both of our formulas didn't acknowledge that school looks a lot different today than it did in the 80s. And so we're continuing to educate. It's such a wonky topic, yet it's the top priority of community colleges because we need to be able to increase that spending cap to better serve our students. And the scary part is it's to a point where we have the money, we just can't spend it because we have money that is unable to be spent because this is expenditure limitation. So we're just asking the authority to spend the money that we have. So these are kind of the state agenda recommendations. A couple items on the federal agenda. Pandemic recovery, the last 2 years, there's been a tremendous amount of dollars and programs to support community colleges and students through pandemic recovery. Now that we're pretty much through the pandemic, we're still monitoring that because although the pandemic is sort of in some circles would say signed, sealed, and delivered, done. Others might not always think that. But the aftermath of the pandemic remains for community colleges and remains for students and remains for our economy. So just continuing to monitor those opportunities to ensure that we're really able to get out of this and both community colleges and students stay afloat through these challenging times. A variety of sort of job training programs at the federal level that support our colleges, specifically with career and technical education and the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. These are two sort of programs and funding sources that are really important to our colleges that we always will monitor to ensure the funding level at least remains the same or increases to better support our ability in these sort of different grant programs. Pell Grant increases and efficiencies. This is also a big priority, something that we will continue to monitor, really participate in these conversations. Pell Grant is a financial aid program. Some of you may be aware of it. There's a lot of conversations about increasing the amount of Pell Grant, so increasing the amount of scholarship dollars, but also enhancing who is eligible for Pell Grant. Currently, Pell Grant is not eligible for short-term programs, so that Semiconductor Quick Start I mentioned. So really trying to grow Pell Grant, and then just efficiencies. Applying for Pell can be quite the bear, and so trying to streamline efficiencies at the federal level to make it easier for students to complete their forms to get Pell Grant. So just continue to participate in those conversations. There is, again, it's good to be a community college given that Dr. Jill Biden is a community college instructor. President Biden and his cabinet are very, very committed to community colleges being the driver of workforce for our state and our nation and our economies. You all may have followed, there was a push about a year ago for a free community college type of proposal. So, really that momentum somewhat fizzled out as other priorities have come forward, but there is still a lot of interest in a variety of fund sources and programs to promote community college participation and completion. So really hoping to participate in those dialogue at the federal level. 9 out of 10 of our community colleges are Hispanic serving institutions. This is a federal designation. And HSIs have a subset of programs and funding to support these colleges, support the institutions, the work that they do, and support the students. So knowing that 9 out of 10 of our colleges are HSIs, continuing to monitor that program and ensure funding levels are at least the same or increased to better support HSIs. Community project funding, this is the second year. It is also called sort of earmarks. There was a 10-year hiatus for community project funding, but really it's an opportunity for entities to apply to for funds to their delegation for targeted purposes. We actually last year applied for funding to support our bioscience program development, and we have secured that funding. So really it's just an opportunity to utilize federal dollars for specific programs to support communities within the delegations districts. Local governance, same thing as the states, but really acknowledging that federal policy being pushed down to each individual community college. We all look so different. We have 10 colleges in Maricopa that look different, that serve a different population of students in a different community. So just being able to dialogue on, when federal policy is coming down the pike, ensuring it maintains as much local control so that our governing board and our colleges and our students are able to participate in the conversation to ensure implementation of those federal policies, are really acknowledging the uniqueness of each community college system and each community served. Last one on our federal agenda is citizenship for our Dreamer students. This has been a priority for our governing board for several years. There is currently an effort at the state level to address this, but there's also interest in addressing this at the federal level by offering citizenship for our Dreamers, which would in turn allow our Dreamer DACA students to get in-state tuition at our community colleges, which has been a hindrance for participating in post-secondary because they're not eligible for in-state tuition. So another priority on our hopeful adoption on our board's legislative agenda. So, November's election is coming, and while we're not able to participate in election advocacy, we are still watching closely, right? Because the results of the election are really going to determine what's next, where we go next, who we approach next. The Arizona governor's race is close. Again, we don't participate. We don't take a position on any members. That is not within our purview. But we're watching, right? Because the current race in Arizona has, 2 different candidates that have a variety of topics and could change the balance of our executive and legislature. So watching that Hobbs versus Lake race very closely to see the results. This was an interesting year because 14 current incumbents within their seats at our state legislature lost their bid in the primary election. So there is an estimated between those incumbents, that's a lot of them surprisingly lost their seat for re-election, and then a variety who said, when I'm done, I'm not coming back. We're going to have about 25-ish new legislators is what we're slated for, which is a huge turnover. There are 90 members at the Capitol, and again, a lot of these people are just sort of returning after they get elected. They sort of return. But this is a historic year and a lot of turnover, which has its pros and cons. Fresh blood, but at the same time, it's a lot of folks who've never been at the legislature, so they don't know the ins and outs of the legislative process. They don't know how it works. There's a lot of jockeying for leadership positions. So it's going to be really interesting for us to see the makeup of the new legislature, the makeup of the executive, and then how everyone plays nicely together, because people come in with huge aspirations. I'm going to change the world, but they don't realize how the legislative process always works. And they're just one of 90 members, right? And then the federal chamber also, there's a real possibility that either the House or the Senate could potentially flip at the federal level, which again is just going to change the dynamics at the federal level. If one of the chambers flips, right now they're both Democrat majority, but if one flips to a Republican majority, whereas the other is the Democrat, and then the president's a Democrat, it's going to create a different kind of way of operating at the federal level. And it's just interesting to see and interesting to be a part of this work, and really all of this changes the way that we operate next year based on sort of who's in office. So while we're not participating and we are not able to participate in any of the advocacy, take positions, we're watching really, really closely. And a couple of ways to stay connected. I have a website if anyone's interested. Website has a plethora of information from our legislative agenda that's adopted, to a session overview to kind of recap what happened the last legislative session, to kind of a district map of what colleges are within which districts. So feel free to check out my website. I'm always kind of adding new content based on when it's available. And then email or call me. I love to hear from you, and I am more than happy to keep you all apprised of what's going on. So if you hear something, hey, I heard this bill, what's this bill doing? Or this elected official, I saw this on their Twitter, what's going on here. Again, I'm not a partisan employee, so I will provide you information within a neutral standpoint, but really a variety of resources for you to understand the legislative process more. And Deanna, I think that's it from me. I always talk way too long.
You did great, Alexis. There's a lot of information to cover. And for those of you that were tuning in, you can just see the variety of issues that have to be watched and managed and moved forward. And so really, Alexis has her plate full, and can't thank her enough for such a great job that she does with Maricopa. A couple of questions did come in, so I'll put you, hopefully not too much on the spot, but elected officials, we had this conversation with some of our students yesterday that generally speaking, compared to other states, elected officials in Arizona can be quite accessible. So whether it's inviting them to come speak or going to visit, what does that look like, and what's your perspective on how easy it is to reach them or not?
Yeah, I think it depends on the elected officials. So at the state level, they're just an email or a phone call away. I would say our state elected officials are fairly easy to reach. They're all fairly responsive on email, and a lot of them are on social media channels. The federal delegation, they're covering a lot more people and a lot more turf. So, while it's hard to get in front of the actual member, I rely personally on a lot of their staff to help, kind of guide that. And they have offices in DC, and then typically in district, or, several spread across their district. And Senate members have a variety of offices across Arizona. So, really at the federal level, I rely on staff, and I rely on staying connected with their office and district. So if you were interested in your federal delegation, sort of starting there at the staff level. Again, state is typically a lot more accessible, so you can just find their contact online and email them your thoughts. And then same thing with local. Local is, I'd say, the most accessible, given that they have an even smaller constituency. So I've really tied their accessibility based on how much mass they're serving. That's how I see it. But again, it's a game of relationship building. So that's not a perfect formula. Some state legislators I don't have a great relationship with. Not that I have a bad relationship, I just haven't done a great job of stewarding certain members for certain reasons. So, you know, it might not be as easy to get in touch with them, whereas some of them I text on the regular. So it's a game of relationship building as well.
Great answer. Appreciate that. And then for those students that might be thinking of entering into the policy space, I think you've done a great job of explaining how there's so many different levels involved and so many different entry points in terms of the policy making process. But working, say, as a page or a research analyst, or, you know, the jobs that you did when you were down at the state capitol, what is that experience like? And would you recommend that for students to look into that?
Yeah, I mean, totally. Again, that experience as an intern, I interned at our state house within the research department. So really, a bill would come down and I would do all the research behind the bill. I would tell everyone what the bill's doing, and then I would look at the history of you know, what's happened in this space to why this bill is coming forth today. So I really served in the research department, and that changed, you know, my whole outlook on my future. And really, it was just an internship I found on our state's legislative website, www.azleg.gov. And that is, you know, why I'm here today. I know our federal congressional offices are always looking for interns, so you could reach out to the individual offices for interns. And then same thing, I know local elected officials are always looking for interns. And really, it was an opportunity for me to get to know the legislative process really, really well, understand the game behind the scenes, right? Because there's sort of the contract lobbyist space, which is more so the person, you know, doing all of the asks, and then it's like the worker bees that are doing all the work behind these asks. So I appreciated that internship perspective because it made me it diversified my portfolio to be successful today. I really saw staff does a lot of the work, right? Legislators ultimately are the ones voting green or red on a piece of legislation, but staff in the background is doing a tremendous amount of work. So, you know, while I have a relationship with legislators, I equally, if not more, have a lot of relationships with the staff members who, you know, are really helping provide the education and information to our legislators.
That's
So
a
I would
great
say
plug.
yes, friendship all the way. It changed my whole life.
Awesome. I appreciate the plug and recognizing how staff are so important to the process. And so for students that you might be out there listening, you have an interest in policy, it doesn't always have to be about running for office and being the elected official. There's an entire machinery supporting elected officials at the state and local levels, all those staff members that keep government running, that keep the process moving, no matter who the elected official may be at that moment in time. So it doesn't always have to be about being front and center. There's lots of great public service individuals working behind the scenes to keep our process moving forward. So I would ask you to consider that if you have an interest. I'm also going to give a plug for our Student Public Policy Forum. That is a year-long academic program where if you are interested in learning more about the process and how to be an advocate and a leader in your community, we are accepting applications. And Alexis actually tapped into a few of our Student Public Policy Forum students not too long ago. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Alexis, and how you channeled student voice?
Yeah, I mean, totally. And these participants by the end were like seasoned lobbyists. Like they could do my job and I was scared. But no, last year I mentioned the 4-year baccalaureate degree bill. That was an effort that the community colleges had been working on for 25 years. And really it was a simple request from the legislature to change our ability to offer 2-year to 4-year degrees. It sounds easy, but there was a lot of contention with our universities, as I mentioned. So, you know, we utilized our SPIF students to participate in those conversations, to talk about, they met with elected officials. Last year was really interesting too, because everything was done virtually because of the pandemic. Because typically lobbying is what it sounds like. It's lobbying, it's standing in a lobby and waiting for members or meeting with members. But this was a unique year, and students within the SPIF program met with, I don't know, probably 24 legislators to tell their stories, talk about how they ended up at community colleges, talk about how a 4-year degree at Maricopa would just support them both financially. It would streamline them into not having to transition to an unfamiliar place. So they started off, we did a little talk at the beginning, but they started off, kind of getting to know and learn the members. And by the end, were truly seasoned lobbyists, to the fact of they could go and they could tell their story, and they were pushing back at legislators, right? Because a legislator would sort of, that's what they do, respectfully, right? They acknowledge that these are students just coming to tell their story and spending their personal time to do this. They're not paid, they're not lobbyists. But legislators would ask some tough questions, and they were able to push back and develop and craft an argument and strategy. And I would say one of the main reasons that legislation after 25 years got across the finish line was the voice of the students. So I saw firsthand how impactful the SPIF students were, how they were able to move a piece of legislation that had not been successful for so long. And I am so grateful, and I just saw how incredible our students are, the story. So yeah, just a plug for Deanna. It is the student voice. They don't want to hear from me. I mean, they have to hear from me because it's my job, but they want to hear from the students. They want to hear from those that they're truly impacting.
Great feedback. I appreciate that, Alexis. Well, I think I have probably popped about a dozen links into the chat. So lots of information for you to follow up on. I want to give Alexis a big round of applause for joining us for our midweek Constitution Day activity. I hope you keep track of those links, copy, paste them. Lots and lots of information that is publicly accessible, what will be on your ballot, voter registration, how to find more information, Alexis's webpage that has a ton of information. So I hope that we have loaded you with plenty of resources today. I also hope that you will continue watching the rest of our Constitution Week activities. Tomorrow, Thursday, the 15th, we will be joined by Avery Chola from Clean Elections, talking about what you can expect to see on your ballot. And then on Friday, we have Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer, who will be joining us to talk about Constitution Day. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and keep watching the rest of the week. So you all take care out there. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Deanna. Thanks all.
Thank you.